This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Sacred spaces. I still remember the first time I ever stepped into this space. I had reluctantly arrived on campus for a day-in-your-life type experience at the Candler School of Theology. I say reluctantly because I felt my mind had already been made up about where I would attend seminary. And if I'm honest, getting to the point of being openly submitted to the idea of seminary was a big step for me. But I decided at the behest of some friends and mentors to visit Candler and Emory University to at least get a feel of what it would be like to be a student here. Not to mention, I attended high school just not far from here, Druid Hills High School. So being a part of this learning community was not that far-fetched. During the visit and campus tour, we made our pit stop here at the Cannon Chapel. I remember walking in and immediately being captured by the space. In its simplicity, it was awe-inspiring. At first look, it could have appeared as barren, lifeless, boring, empty. But there was something about this space. There was something unspoken about the environment. There was something introspective about its atmosphere. In just a quick moment, this place felt familiar. It felt inviting. It felt just right. It felt sacred. As we toured the space, I was captured. I walked around intentionally and methodically, taking it all in, the architecture, the ecosystem, the unspokenness of it all. And as I walked, as I investigated, as I explored, our guide shared its story, the intention of its design, the testimony of its presence, the account of its impact. She shared with us its history, how the architect's father had been a student at Candler, how its features represented that of a train station and the messaging connected to the comings and goings of its inhabitants, how its purpose is one of interfaith, freedom, and invitation. In the moment, I took the time to pause, to digest. What could it mean to be a student learning and living in this space? What privilege would it be to have this chapel space as an environment of learning, this sacred space? This is indeed a sacred space, and I consider it an honor to be standing within it once again to proclaim, "Thus saith the Lord." In our text this morning, our beloved Jesus and his students are standing within their own Cannon Chapel. They are in awe of its splendor, not just for what it represents, because what it represents is what drew them there in the first place. They are captured by its display, and they take the time to take it all in, every nook and cranny, from its stones to its adornments. They have taken a little time to enjoy the view. It was as if they had never been there before, as if they were witnessing a moment for the very first time, but they weren't. This space isn't new to them. It's not unfamiliar. According to the text, they had been in the temple courts at this point for quite some time as Jesus is teaching and proclaiming the good news. But for some reason, at this moment in time, they were captured by what they saw, which isn't unlike life. There are moments in life when and where something may capture our attention for whatever the reason. For some, it is that classmate that we have seen time and time again, week in and week out, but for some reason, they catch our attention in a different kind of way. Maybe it's that movie or that book or that TV show. We have seen it over and over again, watched it over and over again, read it over and over again, but this time something happens or is said that makes us stop in our tracks. And in this instance, they were stopped in their tracks, but not for long. As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. I can only imagine what it might have been like standing in that space, mesmerized by what's around. Sounds pretty close to my own experience in this space the first time, but it wasn't their first time. Everything you see before you is beautiful, it's ornate, but it isn't your first time. Look at the stones, each and every one of them in their right place, in their right position, but this isn't their first time. And as you take it all in, what you see before you won't last forever. No one wants to be faced with the limitations of the moments as they are standing in the peace and adoration of that moment. No one wants to be smacked in the face with reality at the exact time they are seemingly escaping reality. And no one wants to be told devastation and chaos is coming their way at a time when things in their life, everything is in their place, everything seems to be on track. Everything seems good. These are the same people that have already had to face strife and destruction, exile, and abuse. These are the same people whose ancestors overcame 40 years in the wilderness. These are the same people whose ancestors wrestled with angels, changed so much by the experience that their very identity was reborn. These are those people, for all intents and purposes. And yet Jesus, in true Jesus fashion, pours cold water on their unconscious bodies, facing them to awaken to a reality of perceived and intentional chaos. I can imagine it being a very sobering moment. Sacred spaces provide for us sanctuary for the moment in which we inhabit them. Sacred spaces will allow us abilities, opportunities of escape, even if only briefly, that rejuvenate, revive, and recharge us in preparation for what we face once we step beyond their reality. But Jesus reminded them of the temporary nature of the moment. Sounds rather contemporary, doesn't it? The political and cultural realities we face today have caused us to face the vulnerabilities and temperance of our sacred spaces. When 40-year-old Wade Michael Page fatally shot 6 people and wounded 4 others in a Sikh temple on August 5th, 2012 in Wisconsin, that space shifted from one of being sacred to a crime scene and a representation of trauma and pain. When in the summer of 2015, Dylan Roof interrupted a weekly Bible study at Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, killing 9 members, including the church's pastor and another local leader. The pain of the act recalled the same pain and fears of September 15, 1963, when the Birmingham Church 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed. And just last year, when Robert D. Bowers, armed with an AR-15 style assault rifle and at least 3 handguns, opened fire inside a Pittsburgh synagogue on Saturday morning, killing at least 11 congregants and wounding 4 police officers and 2 others. The act rattled, interrupted the ecosystem of what most labeled a quiet Jewish community. All sacred spaces, purposed to be safe spaces for its inhabitants, and in an instant they became political battlegrounds. Where is the good news in any of that? Standing here in this sacred space, having to proclaim to you all the good news, I find myself forced to admit the difficulty of this task. This audience is diverse in many ways with all sorts of experiential backgrounds. Some of you college students seemingly at the genesis of your personal lives and professional careers, nearing the end of your first or second or third or fourth or fifth semester. You don't want to hear that devastation is coming your way. Some of you are beyond your undergrad years, more seasoned than others, having worked in your careers, chosen professions or calls for quite a many years and have overcome situations that have challenged, stretched, bruised, and awakened you. Some of those challenges you thought you would never survive, but you are here. And after overcoming, you definitely don't want to hear, Molly, you in danger, girl. So what do we do with this text? What do we do with this message? What do we do with the imagery presented to us in this text? I must admit I have vacillated back and forth over the course of the past few weeks, contemplating what to say, praying to God, God, give me guidance because I don't want to tell these people these bad things. Because it's easy to jump to the end. It's easy to highlight what Jesus says at the end, that not a hair will be harmed on you, that you will win life. But the reality is, we don't get to jump to the end of our strife and our struggle, our betrayal, our abuse, our chaos, our famine, our pain. But in the midst of it all, even before getting to the midst of it all, how easy is it to believe such a thing, that not a hair on your head will be harmed and you will win life? The text reads, "For many will come in my name, claiming I am he. And the time is near. Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and uprisings, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away. Make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves, for I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict." When in the midst of a thing, or even at the beginning, it's easier to consider that the end, it's near. It's easier to become a prisoner to the fear, despair, hopelessness. It's hard, it's scary, it's difficult. But before all this, they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and put you in prison, and you will be brought before kings and governors and all on account of my name. Even parents, brothers and sisters, relatives and friends will betray you, and they will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me. On July 7th, 1987, Walter McMillan was arrested in Monroeville, Alabama, for the killing death of a young girl at a laundromat. The previous year, Walter had become the topic of much discussion after the husband of a white woman, Karen Kelly, learned that she had been having an affair with Walter. Walter is a black man. Because some were upset about this interracial relationship, Walter was falsely accused of killing Rhonda Morrison. The situation became the focus of Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy, which has also been adapted into a movie coming out in December and January. Because of who he was, because of what he had done, as innocently enough as it could be, Walter was falsely accused, indicted, prosecuted, and sentenced to death, spending 6 years on death row for a crime he never committed. As Brian chronicles this story, he shares the details of countless other cases he has fought on behalf of black men, children, and women, individuals from underrepresented, marginalized communities, through his organization, the Equal Justice Initiative. At one point, he talks about one night in particular when it all seemed to become too much. He started to feel worthless, incapable, overwhelmed. Another man he had fought to save, Jimmy Deal, was set to be executed in just a few hours. He was set to be executed via electric chair in any moment, and Brian was devastated. He talked to Jimmy for a little while before Jimmy's execution, and when he got off the phone with him, he admits to feeling broken and powerless. He starts to question whether or not anything he had done, anything that he had accomplished was worth it. Was he even making a difference? Chaos, persecution, betrayal, hate. Sometime later, a woman in the community who had a strong connection and relationship with Rosa Parks invited him to dinner. The woman, Johnny Carr, invited Brian to listen as she and Miss Parks and others reminisced. At some point in the dinner, Rosa asked him about himself and the work he did. "I have a law project called the Equal Justice Initiative," he declared to her. "We're trying to stop the death penalty. We're trying to do something about prison conditions and convictions. We're trying to help the poor. We want to put a stop to unfair sentences. We're trying to do this. We're trying to do that. We're trying to save children and women and blacks and the poor and powerless and the disenfranchised and the neglected," and on and on and on. As he stopped, read the room, and took a breather, Rosa responded, "Ooh, honey, all that going on gonna make you tired, tired, tired." And then Miss Carr ever so gently and maternally said, That's why you've got to be brave, brave, brave. Beloveds, you are going to have to be brave, brave, brave. In this moment, standing before you after I have just traveled 48 hours to Mississippi and back with my husband to funeralize his uncle, I'm tired, tired, tired. And I'm having to preach a very difficult text to you all, declaring that what's before you will one day be no more, that there may be devastation and chaos. You may be betrayed, wrongfully persecuted, and falsely imprisoned, but we've all got to be brave, brave, brave. And we have been here before. Haven't we as a people, as believers, been faced with something that seemed bigger than us, and yet God? What about the people of Israel after having been in the wilderness for 40 years? 40 years, they were promised the land of plenty, the land of milk and honey, but the inhabitants of the land were bigger and better than that. Even before then, when Moses led them out of Egypt, they found themselves stuck on the banks of the river. The instruction came to Moses to raise his staff, and the waters were parted. Didn't God make David victorious after rejecting Saul as king? Didn't God make the steps of his people louder and greater and larger, causing the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, leaving all that they owned? The lepers ate well that night. I can't help but take notice to the similarities. There have been moments, experiences, situations that many of us have had to face. They have felt or seemed detrimental, life-altering, handicapping, painful, traumatic. If you have not experienced any of them, then trust me, there's a good chance you will. There will be moments that feel inescapable, moments where you will feel surrounded by ruins. There will be, if not already, moments where you feel stuck and desperate, broken and hopeless. Those moments will come. And for the people of Israel and the ancestors of Jesus' followers, they have happened time and time again, and yet they have overcome in one way or another. And there will be times where the things you face will have nothing to do with anything else other than who you are, how you identify, or what people assume about you because of your associations, background, and or identity. But we've got to be brave, brave, brave. And in those moments when you don't know how to be brave, feel you can't be brave, have forgotten how to be brave, those are the moments when you go back to the beginning, back to your sacred spaces. And I think, beloveds, that's what Jesus was trying to get at, that the beauty, the awe, the magic of the space was not in the physical. The physical is, was, will always be temporary. But sacred spaces build for us the foundation needed so that when we are feeling off balance, when we are feeling attacked, unsafe, and incapable, the lessons, the memories, the representation of the sacred spaces within us. It is innate in us. It is dug deep in us. The stones may be thrown down, but the foundation is intact. For when you have been betrayed, when you have felt abandoned, when you have been hated, the spaces you call sacred have fortified you. You will have the words. You will know the false prophets from the real ones because of the experiences of the sacred spaces. You will know. In the same way that the people of Israel were able to overcome, in the same way the disciples were able to keep going after they encountered Jesus, in the same way that the people of Mother Emmanuel was able to overcome, to rebuild, to heal, in the same way the members of that Sikh temple were able to stand strong in the face of hatred, in the same way the members of the Pennsylvania Jewish temple were able to pull together, and in the same way natives of this country have been able to reaffirm their fight, their presence, and fully stake claim on what's theirs and the sacredness of their lands. These groups have an idea of what happens when the places they consider sacred and its permanence become interrupted. We are standing on holy ground, and we know that angels are all around us. Let us praise Jesus now, for we are standing in God's presence on holy ground. Be brave, brave, brave. Amen.